Hello and welcome to part 2 of building your first JavaFX application using Netbeans 7.1. My name is Angela Caicedo and I'm an Oracle Technology Evangelist. So if you follow part 1 of this exercise, you notice that because we got rid of the window, the containing window for your application, it actually looks better because you can actually blend easier, blend nicer with your background, but then we need to get some icons that allow you to quit the application. So in this part 2 of the series, what we're going to do is we're going to cover two topics. The first one is actually how to handle events, and the second one is how to do binding. So let's get started. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to bring the close icon so we can actually close the application. So whenever you click into it, we're going to close the application. So let me go back to the C application, and we're going to create another image view that is going to be the exit. It's going to be my quit button. Okay, going back to my start area, what I can do is I can create my quit button. Again, it's going to be an image view. You remember, you can always click Control Space. It will bring up the options that you have. Again, you're going to bring a new image, Control Space, and from that image we're going to bring my resources. So it's my C app. You take your class and then you get resources as a stream, and in this case we're getting from my images directory, we're going close icon.png image. Okay, and now we set some properties for the quit button. So we set, for example, the height, and let's say the height is going to be 25. We can also set the width, and let's say it's also going to be 25. Let's also position it on the screen. Remember, we're doing absolute positioning, so we can actually set the x coordinate to be 270, and we can also set the y coordinate to be 10. So we actually place this in the upper right corner. Okay, so we declare we need to add it. So one thing is make sure when you add the children's, there are two options. When you're adding only one component to your tree, you can say add. Okay, so you can use this method. If you want to add multiple multiple nodes to your tree, you need to use the add all, so you can actually get several added to at the same time. So we need to add C, and then we add quit on top of it. So okay, we have the image, and let's make sure it's being displayed in the right position of your image, of your application. Okay, so pretty nice. We got it here, not much happening, just an extra image. We want to close the application whenever I hit this image. So let me just again close my app, and we're going to go for the quit, and we're actually going to define some methods. So we're gonna use the set on mouse events, okay? And the ones that I need is when mouse is clicked. So we select on mouse clicked, and you see that we need is expecting an event handler. So we can create a new event handler. Again, Control Space can also give you fill out for you. So we need a mouse event. Again, Control Space will actually populate with what are the methods that you need to implement. So we need the handle method. In this case, all we need to do is I'm gonna call system, and I'm just going to exit with a status of 0. Okay, so pretty simple. So what we're doing is we're now handling the mouse click events. We do receive a mouse event, and this is going to be the handler for these events. So whenever we receive a mouse event from this quit, we're going to execute the handle method of this event handler, and right here we're just quitting the application. So if we run it, hopefully you can actually click and you can actually quit the application. Okay, pretty good. One cool trick that we have on with Netbeans is the possibility to refactor your code. So as we are adding some code into the application, you can notice that it's gonna be getting like a little bit busier. So we can actually select, for example, this quit button. We don't need to do anything else with it. We just need the image, we need to position, give it predefined size, and then we already have the event handler for that, so we can actually take it outside the start method, so it doesn't get too busy. So you can right click to it and you can set refactor, and within refactor there is one option that is to extract that particular code and moving into a new method. So let me just try to click it a little bit higher so you can actually see in the video. So introduce a method. It's actually still not right there, so let me try a little bit higher. Click refactor, introduce a method. I think still not visible, so let me just introduce some spaces here. I can put it all the way up, right click. Now you can see it. Okay, so when you do refactor, one of the options that you have is introduce a method. So we can actually introduce a method. We're gonna leave it private by default, and we're gonna say quit button. Let's call it set quit. Okay. So what it's going to do is it's going to extract my code and put it into a separate method called setQuick, and in the method, the start method, it actually added the appropriate method call for that. Okay, so we already create an extra button, an image, define some, size and position it, and then the mouse events. So now moving on, let's talk about binding. So before we introduce binding, let me talk a little bit about what is going on. So what we want to do is when we run the application, you remember that the image was actually a pretty long image, and it's actually a pretty long one. We're only seeing a part of the image through this particular clip, but you know that underneath there is a much longer image. What I want to do is I want to bind, I want to kind of connect the mouse coordinates of the dragging event with the coordinate of the image. So I can actually click, push, do a mouse down and drag the image along as I move the mouse. Okay, there are a few things that we need to introduce. We need to introduce some variables. So let me look into one graphic that I have here to explain a little bit. So this is your image, right? It's pretty long, and this is the viewing area through the clip. What is going to happen is the image has a particular position right here. Okay, in this case image X coordinate. Okay, and we're going to make a mouse press within this viewing area. So let's say I mouse press in here. So there is a difference from this point that I did the clicking to the origin position of the image, and we're going to call that that distance, let's say SX. Okay, what happened is as I drag the mouse around, so in this case I was originally around here, when I move it, when I drag it over here, I need to slice down also the image. I want to drag the image along with the mouse, but remember we need to keep that distance, that SX distance, from my original clicking position to the origin of the image. So there are a couple of things. We need to move the image around, but we need to know what is the distance between the X coordinate of the mouse event compared to this position here. Okay, so we need to keep that relationship. It's not just updating the image with my X coordinate of the mouse. So we're gonna need two things. We're gonna need the coordinate, the position for the image, and I'm gonna need the distance before where I did the clicking to that origin. Okay, so let's go back. So first we're going to define some um, some things here. So we're gonna use two doubles for that. So we're gonna have a private double, and we call it SX. Okay, and we're gonna have it originally declared by defined by 0. Okay, another double one. Okay, in this case, let's call it coordinate X real. So this is the real X coordinate, and also we're gonna use 0 as the default value. Okay, so what I want to do now is we're gonna do some binding. So what exactly is binding? How do we define binding? So binding is just a mechanism for expressing relationship between two variables. So when one of the participating variables in this binding change, the other one is going to be automatically updated. Okay, so this is actually very convenient. For example, when you're doing model view controller kind of paradigm, because what we want to do is we want to maintain and sync your view with your model. Okay, so you can bind the model with your view, so whenever you change your model, the view is going to be automatically updated. And you can do double binding, bidirectional binding, so it will work both ways. When you update the UI, it's going to be updating your model too. So let's see how we can actually do some binding. So a few things that we need to do. So we're talking about two events that we need to listen to. We need to listen into the mouse pressed, so we find out what is that SX distance that we were talking. That's the first one. And we need to listen to the dragging event. So I will need to listen to the drag. So as I move the mouse, I will update the coordinate of my image. Okay? So let's do that. So we're gonna work with the image. So we need to set on mouse pressed, okay? We need a new event handler, okay? In this case, it's gonna be mouse. Oh, I selected the wrong one. Okay, that's why it's actually giving me a key event. Set on mouse press. There it is. We have a new event handler. Okay, so now we have a mouse event, control space, and we have the handler. Okay, so what do we need to do here? We need to actually find out what is that SX, the distance that we actually explain a little bit. So for this SX is gonna be my X coordinate of the event minus the real coordinate of the image. How did I define it? Did I? Oh, coordinate. Okay. Control space. Now you find it. So it's just whenever I click it minus the real positioning of the image. Okay. Now let's do set on mouse drag. So same thing, new event handler. Okay, mouse event, control space, it will populate it for you. Okay, and now what I want to do is once I know the SX distance, I can go ahead and update the coordinate, the real coordinate of the image as I drag the mouse. So coordinate X real is gonna be again, whenever I'm dragging to, minus, keeping that distance, minus SX, okay? So now we know is going to be the coordinate, the real coordinate of the image. Now we need to bind this one to the C0X position, okay? For binding, normally we use properties. So whenever we're gonna be using binding, we use these properties as the source of those bindings. So properties, we're gonna find pretty much properties for all the primitive data types in Java. We are going to find properties for also object and strings. Okay, so what I want to do, so if I want to observe, so we need to watch out whenever coordinate x real change. We want to make this object observable so others can actually watch it as it change. Okay, so instead of a simple double, what we're going to do is we're going to declare as a double property. So it's actually an observable object, and it's still a double. It's just a property that we need to use instead. So I'm going to change it for double property. Okay, and we are going to define as a new one of the double properties is the simple double property, and we initialize it with 0. Okay, so it's pretty much the same, but instead of just using a plain double, we're gonna use a double property, and this will be a double that is actually observable. Okay, let me change this name. We can actually keep it, so let's keep it. So what is going to happen now, because we are talking about properties, not double, to be able to get the value of the property, you actually need to make a method call, getValue. Now to set it, instead of just saying equal, you need to set the value. Okay, so we're gonna set the value by using this equation. Okay, so it's pretty much the same thing, just because we're using properties now, so we need to do method calls, okay, for getting the value and for setting the value. Okay, so we're in good shape. We already defined the two variables that we needed, sx to maintain that distance. We need the real coordinate of the image. We're already listening to the press event and mouse drag event. All I need to do is define the binding. So the binding is what is going to happen. We want C0 to be able to bind C0, the x coordinate of S0, okay? So the x property of C0 is going to be bind with an observable value. In this case, the observable value is coordinate real, okay? So whenever coordinate x real change, it's going to update the x property of Z0. Okay, so let's run to see if it actually works. Okay, so you mouse press it, and then you can actually drag your image along. See how there is not any jumping or anything. You can nicely go all the way to the end to your image and drag it. So very useful when you bind different properties in your application. Okay. One more thing. So now again, I want to do some cleaning of the code. So let me bring it all the way up so I can actually get this binding out of this into a method, so I can actually refactor, and we can introduce again a method. In this case, let's call this method set drag. Okay, and again, all it's going to do is it actually took all my code into a new method, set drag, and made the appropriate calls into the start method so it doesn't get too crowded. Run it one more time, make sure everything is still working, and we're ready for part 3 of these exercises. Okay, so it's still working, and I can quit. Okay, so let's continue with these exercises, part number 3, and let's keep building more interesting stuff using JavaFX.